Chair, the meeting is live. You're happy to proceed.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome all councillors to this meeting of the Grove Scrutiny Committee. This is the first meeting of Bolsover District Council to take place as a virtual meeting. This is a public meeting being streamed live to YouTube and via the council's website. I have been advised that the live stream is now up and running. If for any reason the public can no longer hear or see the meeting over the live stream, we will adjourn until the connection has been re-established. I will ask the governance manager to confirm who is in attendance at the meeting. Nikki?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, the members that are in attendance with us today are members of the committee: Councillor Derek Adams, Councillor Jim Clifton, Councillor Patricia Clough, Councillor David Dixon, Councillor Christopher Kane, Councillor Tom Kirkham, Councillor Tom Monroe, Councillor Graham Parkin, Councillor Peter Roberts, Councillor James Watson, Councillor Jen Wilson, and also in attendance is Councillor Anne Clark. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Nick, I will now ask Sarah Sternberg, the monitoring officer, to explain the procedure of this meeting.
Thank you, Chair. This meeting of Grove Scrutiny has been called to consider the call-in of the decision to sell a strip of council-owned land at Park Avenue in Glatwell. The decision was taken by the Director of Development. The committee will hear in turn from the members who called in the decision, followed by the Director, Grant Galloway, with an opportunity to ask questions of both parties. Before we start the meeting, members of the meeting etiquette that has been circulated to you all. All members should have their microphones muted during the meeting unless you wish to speak once you have been called on. You may leave your cameras on during the meeting. If you wish to speak on an item, indicate this by turning on your microphone. You may also use the chat function to type speak. The chair will then call on you to speak during the time for questions and debate. If you decide after this that you would like to speak, please enter the word speak into the chat function. When the committee needs to take a vote, the chair will ask the clerk to call on each member in turn to please turn on your microphone and indicate whether you are for, against, or abstaining in relation to the motion. If you are disconnected from the meeting, please try to rejoin as quickly as possible. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact one of the meeting facilitators as indicated on the meeting access details. If you are about to speak, the meeting will wait a few minutes for you to rejoin. At this point, I would also like to address a query we have received as to whether any members at this meeting have a conflict of interest due to having taken part in the planning committee at which approval was granted for the housing development connected to this piece of land. I can confirm that there is no conflict of interest between these committees, as this call-in is reviewing the land sale and not the planning permission. The land sale is a separate decision to that taken by planning committee performing the council's role as planning authority. A specific and different legal and policy framework applies to the planning decisions. In the interest of transparency, however, I will confirm that the councillors who took part in the planning committee decision were councillors Derek Adams, Chris Kane, Jim Clifton, Graham Parkin and Jen Wilson. Chair, I'll hand back to you to start the agenda.
Chair, your mic is muted.
Sorry. Can the governance manager please advise if there have been any apologies for absence?
No apologies received, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any more apologies, councillors who wish to submit apologies on behalf of an absent member? Please turn your microphone on.
There are no further apologies, Chair.
Thank you. There have been Thank you. They have been noted. Declarations of interest. Any interest to declare, or microphone on now.
Councillor James Watson has indicated he'd like to speak.
Right, thank you.
Are you inviting me to speak, Councillor?
Yes, sorry, James. Yes, please.
Councillor, I would just like to declare their interest that basically that I've, again, for a point of transparency, that I've received several items of correspondence from Blackpool residents about this matter. And also, as covered by the Solicitor of the Council, I am a member of the Planning Committee, but I was not at the Planning Committee meeting that considered the application on the 12th of February. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, are you quite happy with that? Thank you. All right. Can I now invite the Scrutiny Officer, Joe Wilson, to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. As members will be aware, that Monitoring Officer has outlined the nature of the call-in that we are looking at today. It's in relation to the sale of a strip of land on the eastern end of Park Avenue in Blackpool. This is outlined within the main report within your paperwork. The report itself was discussed at an informal meeting of executive on the 21st of April, and the decision itself was made by the Director of Development on the 7th of May. As part of the paperwork, you've received a range of supporting documents. You've received the original call-in notice, which was submitted by the 3 signatories, a copy of the delegated decision and the supporting report, as well as a plan showing this strip of land in question. You've also been advised of the call-in procedure, additional comments by members, and a number of resident submissions. You've received a range of background papers in relation to a planning application for a neighbouring piece of land. I'd remind members that that is not the decision that is under scrutiny today. The decision under scrutiny is for the sale of the land. In terms of the process for today, we will be hearing from the 3 signatories to the call-in. They are Councillor Clough, Councillor Kirkham and Councillor Clark. They will speak for approximately 20 minutes. Members will then have the opportunity to ask questions of those councillors. We'll then hear from Grant Galloway, the Director of Development, as the decision maker, and you'll then have the opportunity to also ask questions to Grant Galloway. There'll then be a point at which the committee will move into debate once we've heard all the evidence, and you can then draw conclusions as to whether you feel the decision has been taken according to the decision-making principles. All of the points at which the signatories feel are questionable in terms of the decision are outlined within the call-in notice that you've received, and they are also outlined within your report at 1.5.
Thank you, Joe. We will now hear from the signatories to the call-in, starting with Councillor Tricia Clough, who has 10 minutes to speak. Councillor Clough, please return on your microphone and then please present your call.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Tricia Clough, District Councillor for Alt Hucknall Ward, Parish Councillor and a resident of Blackwell. The delegated decision published 5th of May 2020 couldn't have arrived at a worse time for the Blackwell community. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, when the only local shop was closed for deep cleaning, and many residents particularly vulnerable. The processes and procedures, the prepared report and background papers have raised issues which require answers, as it appears at the moment the principles of decision making have been breached. I quickly refer to the valuation report background papers. These are dated 6th of August 2019. Under section 18, page 34, this report is no longer valid because it is in excess of 6 months from the date of valuation. Councillor Tom Kirkham will elaborate further on this report in his speech. Moving on, with reference to the joint disposals and acquisitions policy, 6.2, page 43, background papers, neither Councillor Kirkham nor I have received early notification nor formal member consultation. One can only assume that this may have happened with the third elected member of the ward, Councillor Smith, in which case that demonstrates unfairness and unequal opportunities. Alternatively, she may not have been consulted, in which case no members have been consulted. This policy is now out of date and was due for review May 2020. Prior to the planning meeting held on the 12th of February, not the 20th of February, as shown 1.2 of the officer's report on page 15, I contacted Mr. Galloway by email on the 23rd of October 2019, as I'd been perturbed to see in the planning application a brochure, Urban Designs, prepared by the developer. Section 4.3 of the brochure states, access is gained over land currently owned by Bolsover District Council. An agreement had been made to purchase this land should planning permission be granted. In his response dated 23rd of October 2019, Mr. Galloway stated, I wrote to the developer following the asset management meeting and made it very clear that the route for the council to make a formal decision was executive, and we would only approach executive for a decision if they were successful in gaining planning. In my response the same date, I requested copies of any correspondence. To date, none have been received. It is impossible, therefore, to determine when the proposed purchaser approached the council, who he spoke to, nor what was discussed at the asset management group. The planning meeting was subsequently held on the 12th of February and the planning act. However, to the best of my knowledge, the minutes of that meeting have yet to be ratified, as no further meeting has taken place. An offer from the leader to meet with members of Blackwell Parish Council to discuss growth, economic development and regeneration was gratefully received. The leader, deputy leader, officers Grant Galloway and Pam Brown attended the Blackwell Centre on the 20th of February 2020. During conversation, the subject of the sale of the ransom strip was brought up. Councillor McGregor tried to close the conversation, but Councillor Fritchley was open to discussion. He pointed out that the proposed purchaser had submitted the planning application at his own risk. When asked if the parish council could purchase the land, Councillor Fritchley's response was, I don't see why not. During lockdown, it has become apparent just how socially valuable the ransom strip is, and has been to the people of Blackwell, the district, and further afield. The parish council have submitted a nomination form under the community right to bid, as laid out in the Localism Act 2011, as it is such an asset to Blackwell. Until the receipt of the Scrutiny and Election Officers papers, 1.2 page 3, my opinion was that no meeting of the Executive Committee had taken place during lockdown, and therefore no movement on the sale of the land would occur. However, it transpires that an informal meeting took place at which members only supported the proposal to sell. Although we have a date, we have no indication as to who initiated the meeting and on what basis, who attended the meeting took place, or if it was virtual, as it was during the stay-at-home period. There is no information on who put forward the proposal, why it was deemed so urgent, how members demonstrated their support, or if any member of the executive did not support the application. As this was an informal meeting, one would have to assume that there was neither an agenda nor minutes. Perhaps Mr. Galloway will be enlightening us later on all those points. Earlier, I made reference to an email in which Mr. Galloway states approach executive for a decision, yet executive did not give a decision, just showed support for a proposal. A proposal from whom? This needs further clarification. There is no doubt that the councillors lost income during COVID-19, but I make reference to an article by Councillor James Way, Chairman of the Local Government Association, called Leading the Way, edition 648, published June 2020, in which he writes, and I quote, "The government has promised that councils will get all resources they need to cope with this pandemic. This commitment must now be fulfilled by the Treasury and include the full cost to councils of meeting COVID-19 pressures and keeping services running normally and compensation for all lost income," unquote. So, if during the executive meeting a desired outcome was given that the sale of the land would compensate for any of the COVID-19 issues, this needs to be dismissed. The council, the government have stated it. Now it is up to the executive and senior officers of Bolsover District Council, along with other councils, to ensure that the money promised by central government is received for the benefit of all the residents in the district. Some residents in Blackwell are not against development. What they are against is having development when there isn't sufficient infrastructure to support it. According to head teachers, schools hadn't enough physical space nor staff for children prior to COVID. How will it be now? If people think new shops will emerge along with development, let me point out that this has been the opposite experience in Blackwell over the years, and we are now down to one shop cum post office in the village. We must ensure that as a council we are open and transparent, that we listen to, provide for and protect everyone, especially the most vulnerable, because as Nelson Mandela said, the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. We have many vulnerable members on Park Avenue. They need our protection. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Patricia. Oh, should I say Councillor Clough. We will now hear from Councillor Tom Kirkham, the second signatory to the call-in, who has 5 minutes to speak. Councillor Kirkham, please turn on your microphone.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Tom Kirkham, out of Hucknall Ward, covering Blackwell. So I was going to originally speak last, but I don't mind going in the middle. So I'm going to focus on the decision-making process and subsequent issues around proportionality, openness, and the interest of the district as a whole. As Tricia's just outlined in the meeting pack, the executive met on the 21st of April. There was no remote meeting procedures in place, so they met in person with the Director of Development to give support for the sale of the land, and this was under lockdown. The meeting enabled the delegation of the decision to sell under emergency COVID-19 powers. This removed the executive from scrutiny, and as a result, today we're questioning our officer regarding this decision. It's highly unlikely that the houses are going to be built during a pandemic. So why was the disproportionate use of emergency powers used in order to give approval for the sale of this land? Each council should have a joint disposal and acquisitions policy in order to keep the process transparent and open. As stated in the meeting notes, the formal notification of the sale was published on the 7th of May. This was the point at which the decision became public, with the public still under lockdown, and as local representatives, we could not meet with our residents to support them and explain the process. Furthermore, they couldn't meet with themselves and give each other support and share information related to the sale. It's worth re-emphasising to this date, there's been no formal consultation in the local community, the parish council and the local councillors, and that's in clear breach of the policy. Other elements of the disposals policy that appear to have been bypassed include The requirement to conduct desk studies into previous land use, no evidence to that. The requirement to conduct an independent evaluation, that's been done through a council officer. A requirement to consult on methods of disposal. There's been no opportunity for anybody else to buy this land or to put in for it. It's been only offered to one buyer. There's a requirement to show that land is surplus, and Anne Clark and Councillor Clough have already explained how valuable it is to the community, and there's no evidence in the pack to support that statement that it's surplus. So finally, the sale has got no clawback, and it's likely the value of the strip will increase as it links into other developments. This disposals policy has been included in this pack, so it must be important, but there's little evidence that it's been abided by. The local plan was approved this year, outlining land for future development in Bolsover district. This area enabled by the sale is not one of them. The deputy leader noted when supporting the planning, against officers' advice, that this vital community resource would make a nice buffer in the failure to deliver the local plan. The targets in the local plan go into the 2030s, so why is there a rush to sell? The sale is to Mr Hill for £240,000. That's the sole road access to the proposed development. It's worth noting that earlier on this year, a ransom strip was sold for a similar amount, only giving pedestrian access to a development. According to the meeting papers, Mr Hill's formal interest goes back to 2017. However, the formal approach wasn't made until after the 2019 election. After the 2019 election, executive members, including the leader, deputy leader and others, have been put onto the planning committee. It's fair to say this amount of executive influence on planning is not common amongst UK local authorities. Unfortunately, this land sale has demonstrated the problem with this structure. The link between executive influence over the sale of the land, approval of planning, and also within this growth committee does nothing for transparency and openness. And concerns regarding perceived conflicts of interest have been raised by a number of residents. In fact, I received this letter yesterday from the deputy leader excusing himself from the scrutiny process within this meeting due to conflicts of interest. An open and transparent council is in the interest of the district as a whole. It is the cornerstone in the council's constitution and is part of the up and coming governance statement. And it's fair to say that this episode has been neither open nor transparent. So, to put in simple terms, the process and the foundation on which this disposal of this asset is being made seems to be against policy. The importance of this land to Glatwell has been made clear, but it's not investigated as part of the sale and no consultation has taken place. The council leader is right to put community support at the centre of our COVID-19 response, but this sale pulls the rug from underneath this community in its time of need. And finally, enabling this sale during a national pandemic through delegated decision using emergency powers is not only disproportionate, the meeting alone has the potential to bring Dominic Cummings' scale shame upon the council. The decision has attracted much public interest, over 1,000 signatures to a petition to stop it, which is on a par to the county petition to stop care home closures. It threatens to cause a permanent fracture between the council and the residents. On behalf of myself, Councillors Clark and Councillors Clough, we'd like to thank the residents of Park Avenue and the surrounding area for their strength and perseverance during this time. And I request that the officer reconsider and not go ahead with this sale. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Kirkham. We will now hear from Councillor Anne Clark, the third signatory to the call-in. Councillor Clark, please turn on your microphone.
Thank you, Chair. Anne Clark, District Councillor and Town Councillor for Bolsover East. I was elected as a District Councillor on the platform by following the 7 Nolan principles in order to build main trust in me as a councillor, both in the ward in which I represent as well as the wider community. For this reason alone, I joined the other 2 councillors in calling the decision into sale, because by not doing so, I would be compromising myself. The ransom strip is more than just a piece of land that lacks any value. It is not a cash cow. It actually informs an important part of village life. It is a valuable amenity and has been highlighted even more so during the current crisis. An application has been made to the land registry by registering the ransom strip as a village green, as it is an area of open space by which immemorial custom has been used by the inhabitants of Glatwell for the purpose of either playing lawful games and recreational pastimes there for a period of more than 20 years. The environmental impact. The ransom strip is home to bats, There are bat boxes in situ in the trees. They also roost in the narrow crevices higher than the tree crown. Trees such as beech are suitable, especially if the trees have cavities in the trunks, branches, or woodpecker holes. Bats use different parts of the tree depending on the time of the year and the temperature. For example, during the summer, they may use the higher canopy to have their young, whilst in the winter they move to deeper and lower within the tree to hibernate. Removing commuting habitats such as hedgerows and woodland by destroying a breeding or resting place intentionally or recklessly, disturbing a bat whilst it's in a place of shelter is a criminal offence, carrying a penalty of a prison sentence of up to 6 months and/or an unlimited fine. The number of natural roosting sites for bats have become scarce. The destruction of these trees will further add to this. Bats and their roosts are protected by law, and this should be a consideration. A roost is defined as any place that a wild bat uses for shelter or protection, and the roost is protected whether bats are present or not. Was a bat survey conducted? If so, when was this done, and what were the findings? The Ransom Strip is also the residence of tawny owls, home for woodpeckers, as well as the local garden, woodland, and meadow species of wild birds. It is also home to a variety of small animals such as brown hares, rabbits, grey squirrels, hedgehogs, as well as the occasional fox. Rodents such as field voles, bank voles, wood mice, and the occasional rat also use it as a habitat. At least 20 different species of butterflies have been identified there, as well as many different species of bees, including the honeybee, the red buff and tail bumblebee, as well as tree, garden, and early cuckoo varieties of the bumblebee. This strip of land is a haven of wildlife and must be preserved. It has given people a lot of pleasure over the years, especially now during the COVID-19 crisis. Was a wildlife impact survey conducted in the Ransom Strip? And if so, who conducted it and what were the findings? The timing of a wildlife impact study will determine the findings due to seasonality, as has been shown in a recent survey where the habitat of an endangered ground nesting bird was missed. Having liaised with both the RSPB and the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, they've both recommended an ecological survey be completed on the Ransom Strip. However, this has not been possible because of the COVID-19 lockdown and staff being furloughed, and suggested a decision should be postponed until it is possible to conduct a survey safely. An independent tree survey, also carried out last week, is in conflict with the developer's tree survey. It identified a smaller area of mould on one tree, which was easily treatable and would not warrant the destruction of an otherwise healthy tree. Local impact on health and psychological well-being. The Ransom Strip is used all year round, from providing disabled parking for those attending community events at the cricket ground, such as the Summer Gala, which is attended by people from far and wide, not just Blackwell residents. Other events include the annual Easter egg hunt, the regular Teddy Bears picnic, to the spooky woods and Halloween, and the Christmas grotto. The Ransom Strip provides a safe environment for the local children to play. Correlation between health and well-being and the environment and trees is well documented. In the latest In Touch publication, the leader of Bolsover District Council discussed how the well-being of residents was a top priority. Does this not apply to the residents of Park Avenue in Blackwell? 2 refugee families were placed on Park Avenue under the Syrian Vulnerable Displacement Scheme. They need a place of safety and security because of health and other issues. There are 6 children between the ages of 7 to 16. Park Avenue, as it stands, is the ideal environment for them. Trees and urban greening play a key role in improving air quality, reducing stress, aiding recovery, alleviating depression, shading us from the sun, encouraging physical activity, saving lives, reducing obesity, as well as bringing people together. I can, if you want to ask me questions.
Councillor Clark, you've just about had your 5 minutes. Sarah, do you agree with that?
It's 20 minutes in total. 20 minutes in total.
I thought it was 5 minutes per speaker. I thought it was 5 minutes per speaker.
No, it is 20 minutes per total. 20 minutes.
Just a minute.
Finally, trees and woods can help bring people together and strengthen communities, reducing loneliness and isolation. Please support the residents of Blackwell, along with 1,000+ people